Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 28. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Cybersafe Digest, episode 28. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of NewWays, and I'm here with my colleague,
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at NewWays.
Okay, hey Toby, we thought this episode we would talk about the psychology of a hacker. Now, I don't know why I should ask you, because I'm sure you don't have the psychology of a hacker.
No, but it is important to try and understand your battlefield, and therefore understanding the motivations behind the people that are trying to attack your network can help you perhaps better defend your environment.
Yeah, this is for sure. And I actually have a very simplistic view, and it really it's not very healthy in a way. Is that I just think at the end of the day they're criminals who are too lazy to get a proper job. And that's probably a very unfair characterization, because I suspect hacking it takes quite a bit of intelligence for some people, and there's also that desire to do something really well. So let's have a talk about the various types of hacker, because you just think a hacker and you think, oh, that's it. But there's a whole load of different types and subsets, isn't that right?
There is, yeah, and actually the term to hack actually has taken on a negative connotation, to be honest. I know we use it as a derogatory term for then what attacks us, but actually to hack something is to manipulate or to edit or to modify, and obviously that's what an attacker will do in order to gain access to your environment. Hence they become hackers, because they are hacking your environment. But it's kind of taken on a different meaning from what you would expect it to.
Okay, well, let's talk about the things that you may hear quite often. Well, people may not, and that if we haven't, we're introducing them to you. So we've got white, black, and grey hat hackers. Go on, Toby, tell us the difference.
Yeah, so it sounds very Dungeons and Dragons-y or Lord of the Rings, but a white hat hacker is somebody that operates on the good side of the fight. So they are typically people that will try to hack for good, for positive gain. So these are the people that are like security researchers, security academics, those kinds of people, and they are looking at not gaining anything materially from it or not looking to cause any damage. So they are looking at how systems work and how they can be taken apart to try and preempt maybe some of the tactics, techniques and processes that other attackers may use. These are the types of people that are often employed by security vendors. So these are the people that make up the research team, so that all the threat labs of the different security vendors. And they keep one ear to the underground to hear what's going on, but predominantly they are using their skills for good and for the betterment of humankind.
And I guess one of the things that is not always obvious or is well known is that sometimes there are vulnerabilities discovered by these people, by white hat hackers, which are long-standing, are in the certain communities are known and have not yet been exploited to a degree. And we only find out about those things when there's a big event or when somebody bad gets wind of that exploit and starts to do it. We had one a few years ago which hits the NHS, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the WannaCry attack, it made you want to cry. It leveraged quite an old exploit that actually had been originally identified allegedly by a nation state, an allied nation state, and was being kept in reserve for various activities that the security services of different nations like to participate in. But it was discovered, it was leaked, and then there was a whole bunch of attacks that were born out of it. Essentially, it was a vulnerability that, when exploited, allowed you to move from machine to machine across the network without having to authenticate. So if you could see it, you could compromise it. So it was a pretty big one, and it was one that, in this case, hadn't been disclosed to the vendor, or if it had been disclosed to the vendor, they had elected not to fix it in order to keep this particular nation happy. And when it leaked, the vendor was then very quick to release patches. But sometimes, and again, that's a different thing. It was the delay in patching this particular problem that actually meant that WannaCry was so damaging to the world, basically. And I think that particular one actually was the marker in the sand that said patching is really important and you've got to do it quickly. You can't wait till it's convenient. You have to find a window to do the patching on a more regular basis than perhaps people have been doing before then.
And that seems to record it gets us busy for a weekend for sure. At generally no cost to the organisation that's responsible. But there you go. So that's white hat hackers in a nutshell. They're the good guys.
Yeah, they're the Gandalfs of the hacker world.
Okay, and we ought to, for reference, at some point during this, also refer to Star Wars as well as Lord of the Rings to give people.
So the white hat hackers are the Jedis.
Okay, that's jolly good. So now let's talk about the Darth Vaders, shall we?
Yeah, or the Sarumans, the black hat hackers, yeah. So
okay, so
think of the contrast to a white hat hacker. That's what your black hat hacker is. So these are the people that they do very much of the same things, but rather than sharing their discoveries for the benefit of the wider communities, they will try to use it for nefarious purposes. So whether they'll try to monetize it or sell the exploit, keep it in their back pocket to use on a rainy day. But essentially, these are almost the same kinds of skills and the same kinds of people, but their motivations are somewhat different. And these can be attributed to rogue nations or unfriendly nation states, criminal gangs. That's normally where you would attribute the black hat hacker. Not always, but that's kind of the vision that you get. Somebody that wants to take these exploits and use them for some kind of material gain.
And in reality, so we have white hat hackers who are the good guys, the black hat hackers are the bad guys, and obviously subsets of those which might be criminal gangs, might be nation states, might be. And the reality is, from a criminal point of view, it could be fairly easy money with little risk, because getting caught doesn't happen very often. We've had a few headline grabbing apprehensions recently of gangs and such like around the world, which is great news, but just a drop in the ocean of the stuff that goes on, the criminality that takes place. And because it's cross-border, cross nations, your chances of getting away with it are fairly high.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're going to be an attacker, all you need to do is base yourself in a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty in your target area. So if you're going to attack most of the Western world, if you go and set yourself up in Russia or North Korea or somewhere that's friendly to one of those places, chances are there's no extradition treaty and you can operate almost with impunity as long as you don't want to leave that country. And that's most of the time when people get arrested is they're flying off to somewhere to spend their ill-gotten gains, and they get swept up at the airport.
Yeah, wonderful. Now then, and apparently between white and black there are grey hat hackers. So go on. What's a grey hat hacker?
Yeah, so as the name would suggest, they've kind of got a bit of both in them. So they're morally quite fluid. It's not normally the case that somebody is playing both sides, although that can happen. But often grey hat hackers are people that are perhaps doing it for different reasons, or they perhaps have an axe to grind. So it's kind of, they're playing both sides of the field, and they would normally be operating on the side of good, but they may attack somebody in a retaliatory way. So there's a debate that goes on in cybersecurity circles, is if you're being hacked, should you hack them back? And the law says that you can't do that because you're breaking the law, but a grey hat hacker may take things into their own hands. So a great example, actually referring again to pop culture, a grey hat hacker, you might consider that Neo from the Matrix. So by day he's a computer programmer, he's a law-abiding citizen, but by night it takes on this moniker of Neo, and he's a like an underground researcher and hacker type person. So you might consider that he might be a grey hat individual. But essentially, because it's grey, it's kind of like, it's a mixture, a blend of the white hat and the black hat. So normally, yes, they would be good, but they occasionally bend, flex, maybe even break the law, or ethical standards to achieve a particular outcome. So yeah, it's an interesting and fluid description for organizations, but sorry, for individuals, but yeah, it's harder to pin a description around it, because it's playing both sides.
Okay, so folks, if you don't know what Star Wars is, or Lord of the Rings, or The Matrix, then the last few minutes have been absolutely pointless for you. But hey, we understand it, and that'll help us in our explanation at least. There's this thing these people called script kiddies, which is, there's an odd description. So what is a script kiddie?
So way back in the day, so maybe 20 or so years ago, the individuals that did the attacking were normally quite skilled and very talented in what they did, and they built a lot of their own tooling in order to further these attacks. And then at some point, some bright spark thought, hey, I can either make my mark on a wider scale if I share these attack methods, or I can even perhaps monetize these. I can sell these attacks to people. And so script kiddies are people that undertake the attack, but they haven't created the attack. So when a network gets attacked, normally there's a toolkit around that. And the advent of the dark web has made these easier to acquire with impunity. And a script kiddie is someone that has the ability to run an attack, but doesn't really necessarily understand the attack or what came before to give them the ability to do that. So
they haven't written the stuff. They just
exactly. So they're normally categorized as being less skilled, because they are basically running somebody else's tools, following a set of instructions. So their malicious intent may be equal, but normally their technical capability, their understanding of the system that they're attacking is perhaps less. Now, the danger with these people, of course, is that they will operate with impunity, and actually what they're looking for is the big score. So it's a bit like when someone does graffiti on the wall and tags it, they're looking for that notoriety. So they may not care that they didn't manufacture the paint and the aerosol cans, but it's the net effect, the graffiti and the tagging. That's what they're looking to do. So they're looking to do the digital equivalent of that. They're looking to gain some notoriety, even though they are not necessarily responsible for or respected by their hacker peers. They want to get that notoriety, and it can be a really quick way for people with a very iffy moral compass to make a lot of money. These toolkits, so ransomware or remote access toolkits can actually be very effective. You can get in, you can hold somebody to ransom, you can blackmail them, you can threaten to disclose information. That's normally what the script toolkits are all about now. And you don't need any, you haven't created it, so therefore I suspect there's probably less discipline in how you use it. You don't feel responsible so much perhaps for the outcome of what you've created.
I suppose what it shows is there's lots of different motivations for hacking. Some of it is money and criminality. Some of it is actually about glory or the feeling, potential of making your mark. It's interesting thing.
A pop culture reference, Jurassic Park. So when they're talking in that movie around the ethics of bringing dinosaurs back from extinction, one of the scientists says that we've been so preoccupied whether we could, we've not stopped to see whether we should. And that's basically kind of the same thing here. People haven't earned the right to use these tools, so they use them with impunity.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So now let's talk about hacktivists. I list here the different types of hackers. Now, hacktivists, gosh, they could fall into all camps here, couldn't they?
Yeah, and hacktivist is a really interesting one actually, because I would say probably out of all of the different types of negative attacker, these are probably the ones that are the least financially motivated. So therefore, they're harder to appease, because if a criminal gang comes onto your environment and ransomwares you, they want some cash from you. Whereas if a hacktivist, comes on and interferes with your system, denies access to the website or defaces it or something like that, they're
Yeah.
not so readily going to be appeased with a bundle of cash. They want to see some ethical or moral change in the way that you're operating your business. So the oil companies often historically been targeted by hacktivists because people want them to stop drilling for oil and creating fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. Bugging them at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds is probably not going to stop them doing it, because they're not motivated in the same way that a criminal gang would be. They're motivated by this sense of justice to do the right thing, and they want to try and strong arm organizations into changing the way that they work and operate.
This is terrifying, actually, because if you are a business owner and are innocently going about your business, but you happen to be in an industry which suddenly gains some sort of notoriety, or you're associated with somebody in your supply chain who is again, compromised in some way, or compromised, not the wrong word, is behaving in such a way that has drawn the ire of hacktivists, you suddenly find yourself in this pit whereby, through no necessary fault of your own or your activities, which you think which are perfectly legitimate activities as well, you suddenly find yourself at the mercy of hacktivists. And as you say, not being able to just pay over the money and saying thank you very much, there you are, you've won, let's now get on with business. You suddenly find yourself in this place where you can't get out of it very easily.
No, and the amount of time it takes to try and get it. If you get hit by a criminal gang and they ransomware your environment and they say we want £100,000 to give you the decryption key, that's a relatively rapid route to the end game, to the resolution. Whereas if a hacktivist comes and says, right, we've ransomwared your environment and we're not going to give you the decryption key until you've done X, Y, and Z, you've met our demands, and that might be completely destructive to the business. You can't just do that overnight or in a couple of days. If they say, we want you to stop selling things to this country, or we want you to stop this particular mining activity, or whatever it happens to be, that's not just something you can turn off overnight. And so the impact could be much greater, and actually financially to an organization, it could be much, much bigger as well.
So I guess, so without extending this too far, but it's worthwhile when we've got those problems. We've got all these hackers out there, but the hacktivist actually is the one that terrifies me most, because I think I can solve most of the other ones. Of course, there is one thing you can do, and that is protect yourself as best you can. It's not an afterthought. There are things that you can do right away to try and protect yourself, and we've talked about these in all the other podcasts so far, and we'll I've no doubt bang on about it a lot more. But if you were in an industry or selling a product which might attract the ire of hacktivists, or the activism of hacktivists, what's the minimum things you should really be doing, Toby?
I suppose it's all the things we spoke about before. It's make sure your environment is patched, make sure that people have as few privileges as possible, MFA on everything, make sure you've got good quality endpoint security software. It's all the things we've been speaking around throughout our newsletters and our digest podcasts. These are all things that you just make it harder for them. I think the other thing that's an interesting point, well, I have seen an organization be targeted by hacktivists before, and it was a case of mistaken identity. So the attacker thought that they were involved in a particular industry that they weren't, and they kind of popped the flak for that. And maybe I don't know exactly how you fix that, but maybe it's making sure that your website's quite clear what you're doing. If you're selling cardigans, make sure there's a big cardigan on the front page so that people don't think that you are involved in beating bunny rabbits around the head or things like that, pouring oil into the ocean, that kind of thing.
Okay, I think that's just given us insight into your psychology there. So we'll analyse that in a further podcast, I'm sure. Okay, we know what the impacts of hacking are. We talked about, get a good infrastructure. We talked last time about your cybersecurity budget. So let's finish off with our acronym of the week, which is actually part of the hacking scene, if I can put it like that. It does sound very 70s, doesn't it? But it's well, if we see a lot of it these days, I'm sure we do. Tell us more about DDoS.
Yeah, so DDoS stands for a distributed denial of service attack. It's an expansion of the original denial of service attack, and as the name suggests, the intention of this attack is to take a service or system offline. So websites, for example, are often hit with DDoS attacks. So if you imagine the impact of someone like Amazon, if you could take their website offline, the revenue that they would lose and what you could charge to stop this. And a little bit of history. So originally we started off with denial of service attacks, and this was where it was one person was exploiting something in the environment to overload a single system. So, for example, there used to be a way that you could send a specially crafted set of data packets to a web server, and the web server would basically keep replaying them to itself, and it would basically drown in its own activity and therefore take the site offline because it was inaccessible, hence the denial of service.
Right.
It didn't take very long for some clever people to work out how you stop this. You have lots of web servers, you can have special networking equipment that can identify these types of packets and drop them. So, and once you identified the source of the attack, you could block that, and then you would stop the problem. So, as this is always a virtual arms race, the attackers then shifted gear. So, okay, well, you can stop us if we come from a single system, but what about if we come from lots of systems? And when we say lots of systems, we don't just mean tens or hundreds. We mean tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And so what some of the attackers do, and normally this comes from nation state because it often needs that level of investment and resource to build it, is that they search for vulnerabilities in people's home routers, for example. If you think how many home routers there are in the UK, let alone the world, if you can take over a particular brand because it's got a vulnerability in it, because up to just recently, these things kind of got put in and never got updated by anybody. So if there's a way you can compromise these devices, you suddenly get yourself access to tens or hundreds of thousands of devices, which if you then point that at the same website or set of websites, how do you stop it? Really, really difficult. Now, there are, again, solutions for this. Essentially, you have to work with a service provider who can identify that traffic, and they basically just change the routing table so that the data just gets dropped. But yeah, so it's a real big thing, and I think the largest, I'm just going to see what the largest DDoS, so it's normally measured in bandwidth and throughput. And if you think that your company network is perhaps 1 gigabit per second, some of these attacks are by order of magnitude bigger than that. So just seeing if I can find a reference to it. So so if you think that your internal corporate network is 1 gigabit, the largest attack, which was on AWS, on Amazon, was 2.3 terabits. So that's 2,000 times more than your internal network.
That's quite a lot.
That is quite a lot. Yeah, that is quite a lot. That's quite a lot. Now, this is back from 2020. So, almost certainly, the next attack will be bigger than that. But it's all about how many compromised devices you can bring to bear. So again, when we start talking about patching and things like that, those home routers can be a real problem. We've seen examples of unknown threat actors believed to be affiliated with North Korea or with Russia, working on targeting out-of-date consumer equipment. So old Cisco and Linksys and some of these older brands that are no longer supported anymore, so they don't get any patches from the vendors, but people are still using them because unless you change your internet provider, you don't change your router ever, do you? It's in and you run it.
I think this is a subject for a podcast in the future, which is what do you need to do at home or outside
yeah.
protect yourself outside your network. Okay, so thinking about the people we're talking to here, which is CFOs, CEOs, people responsible for IT in their organisations, but not necessarily executing it. Should they worry about DDoS? Is it a thing that should be high on their agenda, or should?
I think they should be mindful of it. So there are certain tools that you can get. So certain firewalls have a DOS protection mechanism, and the vendor maintains a list of addresses that are known to be part of botnets. So these botnets are essentially what happens when all of these devices come together and are weaponized in a particular way. So a number of different firewall vendors have this botnet protection. You can subscribe to that, and they can block off the known botnets. Most small organizations wouldn't normally need to worry about DDoS because there's just not enough infamy or money in there to make it worthwhile. You imagine the ransom that you put on AWS if you or onto Amazon or to Google or one of the big cloud providers. If you can deny service, you can ask quite a pretty penny. There's a lot of notoriety in it, and actually if it's a nation state attack, which going after these big providers often is, it's damaging the enemy nation, as it were, or the people that rely on it. You may get caught in the crossfire. So somebody is doing a DDoS on a cloud platform in order to hurt a big organization, and you just happen to be collateral damage because you're on the same cloud platform. Somebody hits 365 with a DDoS attack. Microsoft will do lots and lots of things to mitigate and minimize the impact, but you may be caught in the fallout. But as a direct target, it's probably unlikely, but the biggest likelihood is being caught in the crossfire. Yes.
Okay. So in summary, hey, the threat shouldn't be there, but you might suffer it as an SME.
Indirectly, yeah. If you are large enough to be considered a possible target, you have access to infrastructure that can help mitigate some of the impact of things, but most SMBs don't need to worry about it directly.
Okay, so some good news for our listeners in that it's all frightening stuff, but actually this time it's frightening in a slightly different way and not directly terrifying. Toby, it's been a really interesting romp through the minds of the different types of hackers out there. I think, in summary, there's subsets. The hacktivist is the one that worries me slightly, and with some advice there worth taking, I suspect. Thank you very much indeed, Toby. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 28 of our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.